Startup and Venture Capital Club. This program has been brought to you in partnership with the wonderful folks at Hopkins and Carley. They are a Silicon Valley law firm with a history of working with many Silicon Valley pioneers and startup technology companies. My name is Denyse Cardozo, as most of you know, and I am the Executive Director of Silicon Valley Forum. We are a 38-year-old nonprofit supporting the global startup and technology ecosystem. Today's conversation is the power of partnering with enterprise companies. There are so many valuable opportunities for you in developing these partnerships for your startup, and our speaker will discuss the benefits and how it can really accelerate your growth. Throughout the presentation this morning, we encourage you to ask questions to our speaker by using the Q&A box located at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We want to make sure that you get the most out of your time here with us this morning. Without further ado, I think we can welcome today's speaker, Saloni Shah. She is the Senior Portfolio Development Manager at M12, which is Microsoft's venture fund, where she accelerates startups' growth by advising on partnerships, product, and go-to-market strategy. Saloni, turning it over to you now.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. Hope everyone is doing well, regardless of where you are calling in from. I am going to share some slides, but as I pull them up, I did want to say that there are kind of multiple points throughout that I will stop and check in on the Q&A box about the questions that are coming in. So please don't hesitate to share questions, thoughts, reactions in that Q&A box that I will be monitoring. Let me see, just make sure I can monitor it. Hold on. There we go. Okay, great. So can I get Mandy or Denyse that thumbs up or a yes that you can see my slides?
Yep, we can see it perfectly. Thanks.
Awesome. Okay, well, today we're going to be talking about the power of partnering with enterprise companies, but I'll start off with an introduction to myself and to M12, Microsoft's venture fund, where I work. Tell you a little bit about how we operate as a venture fund, why we exist, what our team structure is about, and then we'll walk a little bit into how to partner with corporations, large corporations as startups or smaller organizations. We'll talk a little bit about some case studies specifically of startups that M12 has invested in, how they've partnered with Microsoft. And then we'll end the talk with some lessons learned about a startup enterprise partnership, best practice sharing with those lessons learned. I will say, I'll stop, like I said, in between each of these sections to take your questions if you have them through the Q&A chat bot. Yeah, that's it. Oh, there will be time at the end for general Q&A, but I will take questions throughout. Okay, I'm going to dive right in. A little bit about me. I am a Senior Portfolio Development Manager at M12, Microsoft's venture fund, where my core job is to support the growth of our companies post-investment. So after our investors' due diligence and decide that we are going to write a check to invest capital into a startup, I come in sometimes during diligence to do some research with our investment team, but then largely afterwards to put together a portfolio development plan for our startups, depending on their business model and their growth goals, and how potentially a partnership with Microsoft as a corporation can accelerate those growth goals. On top of my role in working, so day in and day out, I work with about 8 to 10 startups and kind of work with their enterprise partnership goals. But on top of that, I also lead Microsoft's diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy and approach on what we do for our team, our portfolio, and the ecosystem at large. A little bit about my background. Before I joined M12, I had kind of a journeyed career. Before M12, I was at Microsoft in our HR rotational program, where I was a learning and development consultant for our 18,000 new employees that start at Microsoft globally. I also was a part of our HR strategy and planning team, where I put together workplace trends research for Microsoft's chief people officer and our entire HR function. And then for a while, I actually worked in the office of the CEO, so working with Satya's communications team on how to kind of design Satya's external communication in keynotes and with customers. Prior to joining Microsoft, I got my MBA at the University of Michigan. And in a former life, I was an educator. I did Teach for America and was a 7th and 8th grade technology teacher in the Mississippi Delta, and then a school administrator in Houston through a nonprofit called Citizen Schools. And I have a BBA in marketing for the University of Texas. So that gives you a little context of how I come into the world and come into my job. Very kind of entrepreneurial, gritty with that education background and some like really understanding of systems thinking and how corporations work with that HR background. So let me tell you a little bit about M12. Our mission is to empower entrepreneurs through capital, customers, connections, and unparalleled access to Microsoft. Those last parts, the customer connections and unparalleled access to Microsoft, is really my role as a portfolio development manager. And we have a team of 7 to actively support about 80 companies that we've invested in. Overview of the fund: we were founded in 2016, and we've made about 107 investments to date, which is a pretty high clip for a venture fund that's only been around for 5 years. We've had 18 exits and are super proud that we've had 13 unicorns in that time. We are financially focused. So as a fund, we are not looking to fill product gaps. We are really looking for the best of the best enterprise software, B2B software out there in the market, and hoping to invest in them and help them grow. We do try to invest in companies we can actually be a partner with, help accelerate. We do ask for board involvement in our companies to make sure we are supporting them in our fiduciary duty to help them grow. And our funding is typically around Series A through C, although we are starting to do a few more C deals, but our sweet spot is A through C. And we do have a typical check size of 1 to 20 million. So why do we exist, right? Like, because we're not trying to fill product gaps. We're really trying to just be a financial investor in the VC ecosystem. We exist to win mindshare, to influence the startup ecosystem and other in major technology hubs and understand what is happening in the latest innovation. We often detect signal for Microsoft senior leaders and product leaders to say, here are the technology trends and business insights you can take away from the innovation ecosystem, from the startup and venture ecosystem. And we also do often create efficiencies around other organizations inside of Microsoft that invest for other reasons. For example, we do have a climate innovation fund at Microsoft that does a lot of capital deployment from grant-based, in a grant-based way, or sometimes just pure capital. But we often get climate tech that may not fit our investment thesis, and we might share those startups with our climate innovation fund. So that's one example of how we create efficiencies internally. But really, this is why we exist. We really support Microsoft in kind of tapping into the startup ecosystem. So about what we invest in, and I see we have a question already about investing in certain sectors. I'm about to answer that, so hopefully it's helpful. Our investment criteria: we do pretty much exclusively invest in B2B software. We do have a few examples of B2B2C and a few examples of hardware that is being built on that, where a software is really supporting that hardware tech that we've invested in, but pretty much exclusively B2B other than that, software other than that. We are looking out for a financial return on our investment. We do not require our portfolio companies to be on Azure. We are platform agnostic. We are really, truly an independent investor. So, if you're on AWS or GCP, that's totally okay. We're really looking for that to be your business decision. Although there's more you can do with Microsoft if you are on Azure in terms of a partnership perspective. We ask for board involvement, and we do invest globally. So I'll share a little bit later kind of where we invest across the country. So to answer the question in the chat, these are our tech focus areas, and you can see this on our website. We focus on business applications, cloud infrastructure, cybersecurity, and identity. As you can imagine, it's been a big year for cybersecurity, so this is very much a big focus area for us. Data and AI, developer tools, healthcare and life sciences. Once again, it's been a very important year for this category, and this is personally important to me because I know there are a lot more underrepresented founders in this industry. And then Vanguard Bets is kind of our catch-all term for things that may not fit cleanly into into other sectors. So although we may not really invest in prop tech specifically, we do have some outliers that don't fit in these different focus areas that we invest in depending on the opportunity and where it makes sense and how we can help that company accelerate. Global presence. So this is where we're based: San Francisco, Seattle, London, Tel Aviv, and Bengaluru. But although we invest kind of in these regions, right? So US, Canada, we have a couple investments in LATAM. We invest kind of throughout the UK and most of Europe. We invest heavily in Tel Aviv, Israel. And then we invest in India. We have a couple investments in Australia, in kind of Malaysia, Singapore areas as well. So that's kind of our global footprint in terms of where we've had investments. And then lastly, I'll talk a little bit about the team structure, especially if you're a startup considering a corporate VC or any VC. It might help to understand how VCs are internally structured. We have an investing team that really looks at sourcing these high growth startup opportunities. They invest for financial return. They often are our board directors that join our portfolio companies' boards, and they engage with entrepreneurs globally. We have the portfolio development team, which I am a part of, and we build strategic partnerships with our portfolio companies. We help them sell into Microsoft and co-sell with Microsoft, which we'll talk a little bit more about later. We also deploy and provide a lot of scaled programs and programmatic benefits. So really our job is to help our portfolio grow. We are thinking about how are you going to achieve your next financial milestone, whether it's a revenue growth goal or whether it's a funding round you're working towards, and how can we unlock the Microsoft partnership and ecosystem to help you do that. We have an awesome market development team that helps activate portfolio customer global access. So outside of Microsoft, this team is trying to figure out how to best support portfolio companies in connecting with customers. They also serve as kind of like an innovation advisor to Fortune 500 companies, trying to understand what their challenges are and maybe bring either our startups or startups in our VC partnership portfolio to help solve them. So they're constantly meeting with the big players, Southwest Airlines, Fidelity, I can go on, and trying to understand their innovation goals and be an advisor to them. And they're constantly looking to uncover business trends and opportunities in the VC ecosystem. And lastly, we have a strategy and research team to develop that helps us develop our investment thesis, goes deep in different areas like cybersecurity or gaming or health and life sciences. They help kind of do technical diligence on our startups when we're considering an investment. And they also really help kind of create signal exchange between what we're seeing in the startup ecosystem and how it might support Microsoft's growth. This team, the three on the right, is what you would traditionally call at a venture fund a platform team. And then of course the investment team is the one that's actively sourcing deals. Although the cool thing about our fund is anyone on the team can source deals. So you can send interest to anybody and we can kind of do an initial screen and evaluation before we bring in one of our investors. We do have an advisory board, and one of the reasons I share this is because, a lot of VCs have these types of boards and they're experts that startups can tap into. So a good example of kind of our industry leading experts, they help us with our investment thesis. They help us, I see the chat is going, so I'm going to pull that up too, sorry. So we have people from who are experts in quantum and HPC, AI at scale. We do have a D&I expert that does one-on-one consultations with our portfolio companies on their D&I strategy. We have a modern learning and design expert and a cybersecurity expert. And then on top of that, as a fund, we have a program called the M12 Expert Network. And once again, I share this because a lot of VCs have expert networks or mentor networks that you can tap into. And this is one way we help partner with corporations is like getting the knowledge from the experts that are inside them. Our expert network is a program where we identify best-in-class talent inside of Microsoft who are experts in their field to really support our portfolio companies in 6-month advising engagements around a specific topic area. For example, one of my portfolio companies is really trying to identify the best way to price and package their SaaS offering, software as a service offering. And they are seeking an expert at Microsoft that may have the know-how on how to do that to help understand how to package their product and price their product in the market. And so we're sourcing an expert internally. They will be matched with that startup and they will work on this project for 6 months as an advising engagement. To the internal Microsoft employee, it's an awesome leadership development opportunity. It also helps them understand how startups work, maybe eventually be on a board. And to the portfolio company, they get access to expertise from a large corporation that they may not otherwise. So yeah, and it shares some of the other functional expertise that we help tap into: sales, marketing, finance, HR, product pricing, etc. So I'm going to pause there before I move forward. Maybe I'll just pause, yeah, and just check in on the questions. Please show the slide with the list that starts with B2B that describes your overall interest. Okay, I'm gonna share it one more time if someone wants to take a quick picture, but a lot of this is on our website, so don't worry about that. Okay, I'm gonna start there, okay. Would love to learn more about getting on boards for startups to help with growth and go to market. I'm not sure, Nadia, where you work, but there's several ways I've seen in corporations where you can tap into your corporations. If you work at a corporation, you can tap into their startups organization. So Microsoft for Startups has a program called Mentor Network, and we as the venture fund have a program called Expert Network where we tap into individuals internally to come and share their expertise from a growth and go-to-market perspective. And that sometimes leads to getting onto the board, right? You start with being an advisor for the startup, and if the relationship is great, you get onto the board. Another way to do this is to work with an accelerator or a boot camp that's helping incubate startups and startup ideas and provide kind of your expertise at that accelerator and boot camp. And once again, if you find an idea that you really connect with, that you're able to really support, you might eventually be able to get on the board of that startup. And then there's several other ways too, but that's a couple examples. Okay, great. Thanks, Nadia. Okay, I'm going to keep going if there aren't any other questions. So kind of turning into the core of this talk, which is, what do enterprise, like how to do a corporate partnership, or why do enterprises even want to partner with startups? And really, it's because it's a two-sided marketplace, especially for Microsoft. Like, we see ourselves as a platform company, and we understand that we're never going to have every solution under the sun that a customer might want. So we might have a platform that helps them, and then we want to bring in partners that build on that platform, that provide the unique use cases that we can't provide. And so usually when partnering with an organization, it's because it is a two-sided marketplace. They need partners to help them really get in front of the right markets or the right customers with unique use cases that they may not be able to fully provide. So let's talk a little bit more about how M12 specifically helps portfolio companies partner with Microsoft. We have several categories, but the three key ones I wanted to share is, first, we look at product integrations and product development. So like I said, we talk about the startup's roadmap, and we say, okay, how can potentially an integration with a Microsoft product accelerate your roadmap, or how can it augment your roadmap and provide something very unique to customers? And then I work with our startups to provide the technical support for those integrations, get the documentation in front of them, get them in front of product leaders and engineering leaders to explore ideas or deeper integrations, and really make strategic introductions that help them with their product roadmap. A great example here is, like, you might have a great solution, but not a good way to to visualize it for the end customer. So take your solution, partner with a product like Power BI, and that's your visualization engine, right? Integrating with Power BI. And then your solution plus Power BI to 1 + 1 = kind of 3, right? The second way we really support our companies in partnering with Microsoft is go-to-market growth acceleration. This is everything from access to Microsoft's enterprise customers. So as you can imagine, Microsoft has relationships with pretty much every enterprise customer in the world. And so we really try to unlock that customer access for our portfolio. A lot of that leads to joint sales opportunities. So how can you take that Microsoft product plus that partner's product and do a joint sales opportunity into an enterprise customer that helps them solve their unique challenges or their problems or what they're hoping to grow in. And often that also has a motion of co-marketing and PR support. So how can we tell the stories of wins or share a press release on a customer win or a joint partnership that we engaged in together? And then lastly, a big thing that we do, and I talked about a little bit about this with the expert network and the advisory board, is a motion of ecosystem and networking. So can we bring our startups into a Microsoft Tier 1 event so that you get access to all the customers that might attend that event? Or can we bring our startups into smaller events and they are a part of a fireside chat or a panel and they're getting kind of exposure that way? Another big thing that we do is introductions to Microsoft executives or other VC partners for thought leadership, for panels, for advising engagements. And so that's another big kind of partnership motion that I think sometimes is overlooked. So yeah, that's how we partner with them. But like, why even do they partner? So this is a little bit about the motivations on the enterprise and startup side and what I've seen, at least. From the enterprise side, corporations are really looking to fill product gaps. You can't build everything. And so how can they fill product gaps or fill kind of customer needs with partnerships? From the startup side, it's often to broaden their own product functionality. Like I said, they're not going to, this startup may not want to build a huge visualization engine. So this is a way you can partner to augment your own product. The second thing is expanding customer reach. So often at Microsoft, we might be selling into a customer, and if we are able to partner with someone, we might be able to drive more Azure consumption. So can we expand our customer reach both in an existing customer, but also in different markets? That is really important to enterprises, is like to get more out of the customer interactions that they have. And the startup is constantly, I know startups are constantly looking at acquiring new customers. So that's a big reason for a startup to partner. On the corporation side, better understanding different markets. Often with my global startups that are in my portfolio, a lot of Microsoft people want to just understand a market in Singapore better because that startup is born in Singapore, even though they were, or started in Singapore, even though they're selling globally, including in the US. Some of our business development people locally want to partner with that startup so they can have a more keen understanding of the market that they're in. And then often for startups, it's entering new markets. Several of our global startups kind of took Microsoft's capital because they wanted to have a partner that would support them in entering the US market, which can be challenging. But having Microsoft as a VC in their corner, it signals some sort of credibility there. And then on the corporation side, often we're trying to preserve resources, whether, we're trying to do the build, buy, borrow calculation. And sometimes it makes a lot more sense to partner versus build because startups are really good at unique things that a corporation might take longer to catch up on. And then for startups, it helps them establish credibility, right? When they do partner, they can say they are working with large corporations, Microsoft, Google, Adobe, and that kind of helps them get in front of potentially VCs for their next funding round. VCs like seeing corporate partnerships often because it signals that you have more stability and more traction and stickiness in the market. So that's that establishing credibility is not something to be overlooked for sure. Before I dive into I'll go through these next two things, but I will stop real quick. I see. Okay, no, it's just someone typing. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about identifying a potential partner. And please, like I said, put in questions in the chat or in the Q&A function. Happy to stop and answer them. So let's talk a little bit about identifying a potential partner. One of the first things, if you're a startup, you should do is really identify your goals and what your shared goals would be with a partner. So what is your value proposition? This might seem oversimplified, but I can't tell you how many startups you go to their website and you really have no clear understanding of what the value proposition is. So getting super clear about what your solution's value proposition is and using that not only in your marketing materials, but in your identification of who you partner with is super important. And then understanding your target partner's value proposition. And if it's a large matrix corporation, maybe zeroing in on what organization or product you would want to partner with and aligning the value proposition of your solution with that organization's solution or product. And then what are your partnership goals, right? Like we're really entering this partnership because we want to expand into the US market, because we want to complement our product functionality by integrating with their product, because we want to do joint sales with their customers, because we want to run a proof of concept. I can't tell you how many times our portfolio companies have just said, like, we don't need Microsoft as a customer right now, but it would be great to run a proof of concept with Microsoft just to learn how to do the enterprise procurement process and learn how to run a pilot with a large company like Microsoft. So that might be a goal, and that's totally an acceptable goal because that learning opportunity will unlock a lot of other enterprise opportunities in the future if you're able to kind of really actualize what you've learned. And then assessing the landscape, I find that often companies might partner with corporations, or startups might partner with corporations just because they're in their backyard or they have connections with them, which is okay. That's a good reason to partner sometimes. But is it just the people you know and who's in your proximity, or are you really understanding what your competitors are doing, understanding what the market of partners looks like, and choosing the ones that actually make the most sense for your value proposition? So doing a little deep thinking in that, critical thinking in that, maybe making a market map of what partners exist for you might make sense. And then on the side of the partner or the corporation, often this is kind of what Microsoft's thinking or what large corporations are thinking. How can I fill a gap? And so thinking about how how you can fill a gap that the corporation has, thinking about what motivates the corporation and how your solution can be positioned to fill the gap or fill what motivates them, identifying really, what is their key decision maker for this partnership or the leader that you need to convince, right? And then if it's a channel sales motion or a co-sell motion, really thinking about how is your partner's sales force incentivized and rewarded, and how can you create messaging internally with that partner that aligns with how sellers are motivated. Because if sellers are motivated to co-sell your solution as a partner, you're going to get a lot more traction if you're aligning to their sales quota or to their goals. So before I move on to some case studies, I see one question. Considerations on protection of IP for startups when it's funded by an enterprise. Really, really good question. I actually didn't share this slide. I think you're going to have to really understand what the motivations of that corporate venture fund are. We have super clean terms. We are very founder friendly. We have nothing about IP that we would ever take the IP of the startup or ever are looking to acquire the startup. So much so, actually, that if Microsoft as an enterprise ever gets interested in acquiring one of our startups in the M12 portfolio, the board director and the M12 team entirely recuses itself, so that the Microsoft corporate development organization or whoever's evaluating that acquisition is doing kind of their own due diligence, and we do not provide any financial data, any IP, because that's the startup's IP. So I think The way I would answer this is like, make sure if you're taking funding from a CVC and you are concerned about IP protection, that you understand how the term sheets are being written, you understand that there is no IP infringement that could occur, and you ask the questions of like, okay, if your enterprise corporation ever becomes interested in acquisition, how does that process go? That'll tell you a lot, because if they're struggling to answer that, you'll know that there could be a lot of deep connection that you should be worried about. But often startups do take money from corporations. They want to eventually acquire them. So that could be a goal of yours too. It's just dependent on how you think about your business. Okay, Gary, I hope that answered your question. Okay, so let me talk through a few case studies because I think what brings things to life is really stories. So this is one of my companies, Go1, and I know we have some education startup leaders on the call, so maybe this helps. Go1 is a learning and development company. The way they talk about themselves is they are Netflix for learning content. So they aggregate learning content, but they create no first-party content, so not entirely Netflix. They aggregate e-learning content from all over the world, and they have one solution, and they'll integrate with your LMS or your learning platform so you can get access to their entire library of content. They are a Microsoft-backed company. We have been with them, I believe, since their Series A, and they have done so many successful partnerships with Microsoft. One of their first ones being integrating with Teams and building a Teams app. But really the story I wanted to tell here is about a new product launch that Microsoft had. So Microsoft went into the market and said, we are going to create an employee experience platform within Teams. It's going to be called Viva, and there are going to be multiple modules. One of the modules was Viva Learning. But Microsoft was very, very hesitant to have too many launch partners or people we're partnering with at the initial launch. And Go1 was incredibly interested in being a launch partner. They are a Microsoft-backed company. They've integrated with Teams. They've integrated with Power BI. They've integrated with several Microsoft products, and they wanted to be a part of this kind of learning module. And what we did is we tried to understand, like I said in the last slide, what are the motivations or gaps that Microsoft is trying to fill? And we realized that Microsoft didn't have a lot of frontline worker learning content as a partner with Viva. It had a lot of knowledge worker content, things that come from LinkedIn Learning or things that come from Skillsoft, for example, but not a lot of content for a frontline worker, potentially in a manufacturing plant or a nurse kind of in the front lines in a hospital. And we realized that Go1 has a lot of content from frontline workers. So then we used that angle and that messaging positioning and roadshowed and met with the product leaders, the business development leaders who were the decision makers in who partners with this new product, and basically said that they could fill this very unique content gap that Microsoft is looking to fill. And ultimately, that resulted in a signed partnership deal with Viva Learning. Go1, speaking of that co-marketing, Go1 was announced as a partner in one of Microsoft's biggest conferences called Microsoft Inspire, that's designed for our partners. They were announced via a blog post. They were in multiple executive keynotes, including their logo being on a slide that Satya showed in his keynote, Microsoft CEO. So it's a lot of co-marketing visibility for them on top of a signed partnership for an integration. And now they're actively working on how to connect with the Microsoft field sales team and design a go-to-market plan for around the Viva Learning general launch and how to co-sell with Microsoft, which they're already doing, but now they're going to be doing it uniquely with this product. So they're designing the plan. And on the right-hand side, I'll share like what are our next steps, right? We really, like I said, need to understand realize the revenue results from this integration, right? The end goal here, although the integration is great, is for Go1 to increase their revenue and enter new enterprise customers through this integration. And so to actualize that, we're working on how do we understand how the sellers inside of Microsoft are going to be motivated to sell this new product, and how we can share the Go1 partner story aligned to that sales quota or those sellers, what those sellers do. And then ensuring that the sales leader inside of Microsoft understand what GoOne is really good at, what their value proposition is, so they know when to bring GoOne into customers, and that they're aware of the integration. And this can get just like so tactical. Some corporations will include partners in their sales playbooks. And so that is something we're looking at with GoOne as well. We have a manufacturing sales playbook specifically for Veeva. Can we make sure that GoOne pops as a partner to bring into manufacturing or healthcare deals? So that's like a very much a product development story. I'd like to share like a joint sales story. So Workboard is another huge really important investment for the M12 portfolio. And they have built an OKR management solution, and they were on AWS, but very quickly realized, they might be able to glean a lot from the Microsoft partnership, given that their value proposition in OKRs and running enterprises is really well connected with Microsoft's mission of helping every enterprise be more productive and achieve more. And when they saw that alignment of value proposition, like I said, not all M12 portfolio companies choose to shift to Azure. That is very much their own business decision. But I think with Workboard, they really saw those aligned missions and aligned value propositions. So they chose to transition to Azure. And then they really integrated on the Microsoft platform to make the most of that transition. So they are integrated with Office, Teams, Outlook, Word, Excel. They are integrated with Azure DevOps. They are integrated with GitHub, and soon going to be integrated with Veeva, which I was just talking about, and Power BI. But what has that helped them realize? Customer access. So they are co-selling with Microsoft. So it's a channel sales motion. The field understands that Workboard is a preferred partner in the OKR solution. So when they're talking to customers and they understand that the customers are trying to figure out how to be more productive about business decision-making and goal setting, they know they can bring Workboard in as a partner on top of the Microsoft productivity suite, Teams, Office, Outlook. And they've won several huge customer deals in partnership with Microsoft this way. And internally, actually, they've been able to sell into the Microsoft organization. So that's another motion we really didn't talk about in terms of enterprise partnerships, is that if you are partnering with a corporation through channel sales, you might also get internal adoption with that corporation. And as you can imagine, having Microsoft as a customer for Workboard as a startup is a huge deal. And so that's a bit of a customer access channel sales story in terms of how a partnership has come to life for one of our portfolio companies. I'll pause again. I don't see any questions before I go through my last section, which is best practices from lessons learned. Any questions? Okay. It's a very quiet audience. Well, I will be stopping for Q&A at the end, but please don't feel nothing is off the table. If I can't answer it, I'll be honest. Okay, so best practices. How do you even start? So let's start with getting connected. I like to think about who is the decision maker that you need after you understand what your partnership goals are. And there are several categories, right? So if you're really looking just for a product integration, you might be looking for an engineering or product lead. If you're looking for go-to-market access, co-selling, channel sales, selling with the enterprise, you're looking at account executives. So individual sellers who might manage specific accounts, or field sales leaders that might manage entire regions or entire industries. If you're looking for co-marketing support on something you've already done, you're looking at product marketing organizations. And if you're looking for full partnerships, so you want to do all of the above and really come up with a comprehensive plan, you might often be looking for a business development lead, an ecosystem lead, or a partnership lead inside of that organization. So that gives you hopefully a framework to say, who should I even get connected with in a giant enterprise? And these titles might be a little different, but generally it can fall into these categories. I highly recommend both the top-down and bottoms-up approach. So if you have the ability to get a warm introduction to an executive or a business unit lead, that is really powerful. And what you want to do with that introduction call is share a vision of that partnership and really share like the big goals. If you, after that, I definitely recommend after or before getting connected with the people on the ground doing the work. So that bottoms up approach. So whether that's the account executives or the individual business development people, and these individuals, you of course want to share the vision of the goal of partnership goals, but also these are the people who will help you create a tactical plan around customer connections or partnerships. And then I cannot underestimate enough, and I'm going to so much so take this and put it in the chat, the benefits of writing a really great forwardable email. Like it is such a huge, there we go. Had a bit of a freezing situation. Writing a really great forwardable email, and like I said, I'm going to put this article in the chat, is so powerful. I often do this on behalf of my startups because I really understand what internal stakeholders are thinking about, incentivized by, motivated by. But if you're doing this work on your own without a connection internally into an enterprise, writing a great forwardable email that you can send to one point of contact and they can share internally is so powerful. And this article shares kind of all the steps to a great forwardable email, but starting with a quick introduction about you, doing a brief description about you and your company, and then making sure that you are sharing exactly why you are trying to connect with them and what your request is, like very specifically. Often in my forwardable emails, it's like, can we do an introduction call to explore a partnership around X? Right? That's a very specific ask. Providing your contact details, whether that's an email address, which they probably already have, but LinkedIn, website, or even a Calendly on how to schedule, or asking them for how to schedule if your request is time. And then maybe even going as further as suggesting times if your request is an intro call where you want to explore ideas. And then lastly, best practices on executing a partnership, which is where I see a lot of startups struggle and if not fail. First, prepare for that first meeting, okay? Show up to the conversation with understanding what their goals are and what your value proposition has to meet those goals. You can find tons of information about enterprises publicly, financial reports, statements, spend time on their website, monitor their recent news pages, product launches, customer wins. You want to be able to come in with specific examples based on how that enterprise is operating. And, I always recommend, if you can, leverage internal connections. So if you have a friend of a friend or someone that works at a big company that you want to partner with, meet with them, do a pre-meeting, understand a little bit more about the organization, understand about their business goals. If they have OKRs, which is objectives and key results, understand what their OKRs are. So when you go into that first meeting with the executive or the decision maker, you are going in way more informed. So leverage those connections. Meeting with the corporation live, take time to do introductions. So I can't tell you how powerful it is to really understand people's roles inside of enterprises because they are heavily complex and matrixed and constantly changing. So take time at the beginning to do introductions and understand what the role is of the person you're meeting with. And even if you can understand their strategy, what their goals are for the next year, ask them questions. Paint a vision of a shared partnership and what you can achieve together, and then build in time for their feedback and their reactions to that vision to see, is this resonating? Do they actually see some capability of partnerships here? And then document and send afterwards tactical next steps that you decide on, whether that's another meeting, whether that's you sending a deck, whether that's them sending you materials on how to do an integration. And be sure to send that over right away to keep the momentum going. Managing a partnership. Now, this is where startups really struggle, is they kind of disappear. And the corporation will also disappear because they're slow. So assigning a PM or a head of business development or a head of partnerships, someone in your organization whose role it is to forward these partnerships is super integral, making it a part of their job to help move things forward. And enterprises do move at a much slower pace than startups. And I don't think it's a bad thing for startups to keep up the momentum. I mean, just last week I heard from a business development partner, like, yeah, this company's bugging me and nudging me a lot, but that's okay. That shows that they actually really want to do this partnership and we need to respond, right? So, I mean, there's a tactful way of understanding whether the partnership is actually viable if you're nudging too much, but be sure you have someone who's keeping up the momentum on next steps. And then lastly, this is super important. Ensure you have someone who's constantly reevaluating a partnership, right? Just because you started an agreement or you started down a path doesn't mean that it makes sense for your business moving forward. You don't know what's going to happen in the future. So make sure you're evaluating how many resources you're putting into each partnership and whether it's giving you what you wanted out of it, whether that's revenue growth, a completed integration, co-marketing power, brand power. Just make sure you're constantly reevaluating, because you don't want to be in a situation where you've put a lot of resources into one egg and it's not reaping any benefits for your startup. That's where startups, I think, do get a little drain thin if they're trying to do too many big enterprise partnerships. And then if you are successful, if you do get a customer win or product integration or something really cool, tell that story. Document it, whether it's a press release or a customer blog, case study, video, whatever it is. Tell that story and use that story asset, whatever content you create, to continue momentum. I can't tell you how many times with my startups I say, let's get your first 3 customer wins with Microsoft through the channel sales motion, and then let's tell a case study story of one of those customer wins. And then you use that case study with sellers internally to say, hey, this is how this account executive won a customer over with a partner. You can do that too. And that helps other sellers understand and connect the dots on how they can work with you as a startup partner. So yeah, that's some best practices and lessons learned on partner execution. I will stop there on that slide and see if there are any questions. Also, feel free to come off mute if you want to ask a question that way.
They can't come off mute.
They can't come off mute. Sorry. But feel free to add in the chat or in the Q&A box. Okay, it can be about M12, about my background, about partnering with Microsoft specifically. I will say venture funds, corporate venture funds, corporations often have venture funds and startup organizations. So Microsoft for Startups, which is an organization inside of Microsoft, has a whole different charter than M12 does. So, sometimes finding the right organization as a startup partner is important as well. Any advice for someone looking to join a corporate VC? Are most teams members internal or external? Okay, sure. Happy to talk about this. Yes. I can tell you uniquely at M12 what we look for, but I think that it depends on the corporation. So I will say at M12, there are most of our investors come from the industry and have a financial or banking background or previous investment experience. So we really are very external focused when it comes to our investment team. That doesn't mean that we haven't hired people from internally at Microsoft, but we do want you to have former investor experience. Now on the second side, which is the platform team, which is usually portfolio support and development or helping run the fund, I would say we are way more open to people joining internally or externally. For example, at M12 portfolio development, we were looking for a lot of people who have Microsoft experience because we do help our companies partner with Microsoft, but we are not closed to external talent at all. But I think that changes from CVC to CVC. So it really is understanding kind of what those CVC goals are, what the roles in the team structure is, and then kind of knowing how to position yourself. Okay, we have a few more questions coming through. what about M12 investments in South Africa? How can a startup from South Africa link with M12? Right now, we do not invest on the African continent, and that does not mean that we might not in the future. I will say we have on our website at the bottom, or I think it's the top, a way for startups to submit a interest form. So you can submit an interest form that way. Unfortunately, we don't invest there. Honestly, we don't have any investor presence there. We try to make sure we have investor presence in local markets. And so what I will say is right now, we unfortunately don't invest in that market, but it doesn't mean that we won't in the future. We have a new head of our fund. She's thinking about our future strategy for the next 5 years. So I would say keep in touch. The next question, does Microsoft ever consider hardware or technology startups? Yes, we do in terms of, and then there's Microsoft and there's M12. So M12, Microsoft's venture fund, I would say it is rare, super, super rare, but we do have a few examples. Wandelbots is one, it's a robotics startup. Another one is Vertical Aerospace, which is an electric vehicle lift startup. It's electric helicopters. But the thing with these startups is they have really strong software that is powering that hardware technology. And so that's where we saw we might be able to really support them and accelerate their growth. So I would say we need a very strong software connection or platform where we can help accelerate the company for a hardware investment to be considered. Microsoft largely, absolutely. There are ways to partner with Microsoft as a hardware technology company. It's just about what's your company, what's your value proposition, what product or engineering team should you get connected with internally to help with that. So hopefully that answered that question. More coming through. Do you partner with Canadian companies? How can we connect with M12? Yes, we do. You can connect on that submission form on our website. You can also reach out to me on LinkedIn. I can't say that I will be super short timeline in my responsiveness, but I would highly recommend submitting a form through our website, an interest form through our website. We monitor that monthly, but we do invest in the Canadian market. Thanks for asking. Okay, only 4 or 5 minutes left. Any other questions? If not, Denyse, I will stop sharing and hand it back over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Saloni, for the great presentation. So much great information you shared too. And it also seems like Microsoft offers some great opportunities and resources for startups. So that's really good information. And of course, thank you to everyone who joined us today. Our next Startup and Venture Capital Club event is on September 9th, and we are going to discuss finance and taxes for startups. And we hope you don't miss that one as well. So thank you for joining us again, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. Bye.
Bye, thank you.